Hello everybody, welcome to Class 8 of sil201, Intermediate Silhouette Effects, with me, Ben Brownlee. And in this class we're going to be carrying on from where we left off last time, and we're looking at human movement and human rotor. And we're going to take it to a slightly different place this time, because if we take a look at our material, we've got some spinning and actually some jumping and leaping, which is actually quite extreme in this example. But the process of people moving, turning, spinning, just they would do with normal movements, isn't actually all that dissimilar from the techniques we're going to be looking at today. So what we saw last time is how we start to break up different elements into smaller sections. And the reason we did this is to try and keep a nice consistent edge, because after all, that's really what we're all about when we're trying to rotate this stuff up. We're trying to keep that edge nice and consistent. So if we take a look at the movement we've got going on here, we want to find a way of carrying on those shapes, even though we've got a huge amount of movement, and sometimes the shape is going to disappear, and other times parts of the body are going to appear that we hadn't seen before. Now, there are a few different strategies for actually looking at that. One of those is about creating new shapes to take over where the old shapes are not filling in anymore, and another one repurposes the shapes that we've already got and puts them to good use despite the changing circumstances. Okay, so let's get on and do it. Let's come over here and we'll call this left leg. Put this within the camera stabilize still. Bump that in there. Cool. And actually first I'm going to look at some of this leg here anyway. So I'll lock up all of this stuff here, but I'll take my my leg left top and my leg glute out. Put that back in the camera stabilize thing here. Because if you remember, one of the first things we did last time is to stabilize everything up, and that's what this camera stabilize layer is obviously doing. So that usefulness is still there, and if we had our leg top and our leg glute in there, and we try and manipulate those shapes within inside this layer here, that's within the layer, the camera stabilize, as we've seen before, that's not going to work. So that's why we have to keep these out. So just a quick way of looking at the hierarchy there. Cool. All right. So let's make sure we've got our camera stabilize layer on. There we go. Cool. And I'm going to actually turn off visibility on the rest of the leg, and we're going to look at the leg top to begin with. So let's see what this is doing. Okay, so the first thing it's doing is actually it's extending up as it goes up for the jump. So the shape is changing a little bit, but actually nothing that I don't think we can't transform. And come in to our rotate here, come out the quick rotate with the W. And we can just reshape using the holding down the Alt key for most of this. Then I'm going to need to go into the reshape tool over here just to do a bit of reshaping there. Let's see how that's fitting in. Generally, we've got the point-to-point matching working out now. We've just got to fill in the middle area, and obviously as we also saw last week, the move that we've got going on here isn't a nice linear turn. There's stops and starts, so we'll come into where it's most out, which is this frame here, so roughly between the other two keyframes in this case, and we'll come down here, and again I think we're going to have to reshape this. Using the reshape points. You can see this is coming out a little bit too high, so cool. Cool, so we look at the movement going on there. We want to take it up again. So probably where the leg starts now to rotate up and around. Now this is quite interesting because what's happening is actually the back of the leg, which we've been rotating up till now, is disappearing and it's being replaced with the side of the leg here. So we do have a choice. Do we come in with a new shape that's going to take over the side of the leg, or do we repurpose this shape here to actually come in and take the role of the side of the leg now as well? So let's see how well we can get away with that, or how well we can actually get that done. Because if we've got the shape going, which is, and it's not sort of going to be fighting too much with where we are before, there is actually a good argument to be made for just repurposing. So we're going to try and keep it as consistent as possible, so I don't want to take up too much of what's going on in the buttock area. And here's where we've got a break from where I've been doing most of the rotor up till now, because most of the keyframes I've been doing have been based on natural movements. Here, where things are going to start to change quite dramatically, here's actually a good point to start to switch over to doing that bifurcated roto, because it is difficult to find the sort of natural motion breaks within this particular movement. So here I'm going to come into my two keyframes, find the middle point of that, roto that up, find the middle point of those two, and then see what we can do there, and then check that through. And this should give me the a bit of a good balance between the number of keyframes and actually the speed of doing the roto up. Cool. So actually the transition here between back of the leg to side of the leg is fairly smooth, so this is going to work. It's going to work quite nicely actually. So okay, and here side of the leg is going to become side and front of the leg as well. So let's take us to a point where everything's clear again. So around about frame 93, and let's come in and transform this up. So take it relatively, remember where we're looking at the joints and things last time, so carry on with that idea of rotating around the joint. And actually, if we hold down the Alt key to do the distortion stuff, we can get this relatively quickly. And then do the old bifurcating trick again, so come into the middle of the last two keyframes, add a keyframe there, do the same thing and then check it through. Cool, and let's play that back. Just see it in silhouette to make sure that there's nothing that really stands out. Seems to look alright. Cool, and then as the leg goes again around, actually we'll just do this to frame 100 for now. Yeah, so as it goes around, So we'll take it to 106 to the next bit here. We'll come in, stabilize that back up again. We'll come in and transform this again. So let's see how this is going to work out. Cool. Like before, I'm more interested in the edges here. So long as these edges are looking cool, then the rest of the stuff should be picked up. Oh, the stuff, let's have a look here again. So all of this stuff here, where it's sort of passing over the knee joint, this should all be picked up with other shapes later on in the process. Might have to do a bit of reshaping there, probably not all that much. Another thing we haven't looked at is actually the ability to just look through the different color channels and just check those out and see if any of those give us a good edge to look through, because sometimes, especially when you've got loads of different colors going on, it can get a little bit distracting to see what you're actually looking for. When we've got motion blur and all of that, it can be far easier to find the edge, the proper edge, within one of the color channels. Which green is actually pretty good here. So yeah, easier to find the edge on one of the color channels than just individually, just in the entire RGB. Okay, here's going to be quite interesting because we are on this little transition between the different sides here. It looks like we've got a side of the muscle coming up there, the leg muscle here is actually poking out in a different way than we had it covered in previous keyframes, because of course we've got, let's turn all of that on there, so we've got, you know, none of that muscle going on there because that's contracting back in, but we can see very clearly here we've got this side here plus this coming up here for the edge. But in this case, I'm actually not going to sweat it at all, because we've got all of this stuff here with the other leg coming in that's going to have to be rotoed anyway. That's going to take over the main edge. So long as this shape here remains consistent, it doesn't have to be perfect, because the rest of it here should be filled in with the other object. So if I do a little bit of reshaping, I don't have to do much, because I know I've also got my knee joint coming in to take over some of the strain later as well. So that's, you know, just to try and save us from the hassle of doing frame by frame roto, where we don't absolutely need to do it. And let's play that back. So here we've quite successfully made that change between the back here, back of the leg, going over to the side of the leg, then to the front, back to the side, and then obviously as he completes the turn, we're going to go back to the back again. And we did that without creating any other shapes. So that's not bad. Let's have a look at what we're going to have to do with the glute though. Could turn my glute back on, make it a different colour. Because this offers some slightly different challenges. So taking a look at this now, we can see that as the buttock goes up and around, completely disappears out for a good number of frames. So from about frame, let's have a look, about frame 92, probably to frame 106. So a good, half a second here. Does disappear out and then comes back with a vengeance. Splat. There we go. So not only that, it's when it comes back, it's actually should be in the same relative place as it was when it started, because we're both looking at, let's take it from frame 72. So frame 72, it's actually, where's our last frame that we did? There we go. 65. So frame 65, it's looking good there. Then we come back to about frame 127, and it should be in the same, same relative shape. Just going to be a little bit bigger. But the transformation that happens as it goes through here means we've got some rotational shift, we've got some perspective shift, and if we follow it through, it's going to completely sort of flip around, obviously. So we've got actually a bit of interesting work to be done on this. So let's come up and get the other stuff done first. Let's come up around about where our last keyframe was for the leg top. Around about there. And it's going to be doing the same sort of movement as well. It's going to be doing that sort of elongation as the leg stretch it up. So let's check our point-to-point matching. Turn the stabilize back on. So we've got a bit of stretching going on there. Do the same bifurcation trick that we did previously. And it's also at this point where we can see whether or not we're going to have to come back onto our leg here. Yeah, I actually definitely am. Just to sort of fill this in here. We're going to have to be doing some reshaping on this particular object. Because this bit that we had uncovered previously was much more to do with the quadricep, the top of the leg, than it was to do with the glute there. Cool, as long as that's covered. Great. Okay, so let's come up here and see what's going on. Now the movement of the glute isn't actually as much as the legs. It's not swinging up and around. It's sort of just kind of staying there and or sitting there and staying there. So looking for good points to match, I'm looking for my reference points, which are going to be, well, actually we take it back a little bit. It's up at this belt here is really where the top of the shape is. That's kind of where we're following that edge of the buttock there as well. So really the movement between those two wasn't as extreme rotation as with the leg. And here it compresses up again. Cool, so just following the muscle around. Okay, here's where it's going to get fun again. So look what's happening here. So we've got the bottom edge here. It's now flipping over and I'm going to have to rotate it. So we could do that in situ, but actually I kind of find it sometimes helpful just to get me oriented first, is to do the rotation before sliding into place. And this also helps, as you can see, to kind of keep that nice consistency going as well. Because it keeps my brain kind of oriented in what is meant to be going on. Because here, again, we've got another rotation coming on. So the top edge, or the bottom edge I should say, is now going to be at the top. So bringing that in there. You can see now, this is where the interesting stuff is going to happen, because the difference between the two keyframes, or the interpolation between the two keyframes, isn't going to be perfect. So this is where we line everything up, get the shape right again. And I'm going to reshape it to take in this area here as well. Just take us back to transform for a second, just so I can distort it a little bit more. So I avoid, wherever possible, doing the reshape. Just because it gives me a much more consistent frame. Or sorry, much more consistent shape. Cool, and then here we come in, do our bifurcation. And I can see again that we're going to have to bring our leg over a little bit more. Cool, so as before, the shape here that we're rotating up isn't specifically to do with the exact object that we were rotating previously. You know, it kind of is, because it's still getting the line here, the edge of the buttock here, but you know, the big meaty bit, which actually was this line down here, you know, isn't that big meaty bit anymore. It's kind of taken on a slightly different edge. But again, this is fine because we've kept our edge consistency all the way through, and it's a whole lot easier than adding a ton of other new shapes. What we'll do is come in and reshape this a little bit more though. If you ever get lost, and this is actually something with these types of movements, it's actually very, very easy to get lost when things start rotating around. A really cool thing, if we come into the silhouette preferences, we'll come to actually what's in shape. We come to shape and we come to number points, and we'll turn this on to all for the time being. Hit OK. Then if we're in our reshape tool rather than the transform tool, we can see, if I go in here a little bit, we can see we've got numbered points coming in next to our dots, or next to our control points, and we can change the if I change my control point color here, hit apply, that will update the control point color and the point numbers as well. So turn this to white, for example. These all become white. Let's take this to purple. We're not going to miss that. Oops, that's the wrong one. There you go, lovely magenta. Now you notice actually that some of these points aren't sitting exactly where the control points are, and that's because they're nested within this this camera stabilize thing here. The numbers themselves, if I take this out, see the numbers themselves do fit exactly where they're meant to be, but as soon as they're in any other sort of motion tracked layer, this is where things start to fall off a little bit. So if your shape is in a layer where you've got quite a wild motion tracking going on to stabilize the shot up, you can find that your number points here actually don't coincide with the shape at all. So you have to take them out. It's not ideal. But that's just a little thing, and it's not it's not a killer most of the time. So if I take a look at my glute here, and if I'm hunting for the top edge, I know I'm looking for control points number 1 and number 8. So as those go around, to my stabilize back on again. So as those go around, we can see that they're moving in a nice and consistent way. So if that didn't happen, then we know that something's wrong with our shape and we need to, delete some keyframes and start again. One of the other things we can do, if we've got quite an extreme change happening here, and we also get lost, we can come back to a previous keyframe where things are looking fairly similar, or at least in the same sort of general overview, same general area. Copy that keyframe, paste that in, and then at least that gives you, your points back again pretty much where they need to be. So 1 and 8 are at the top. So now we can come in and transform this up. However, that needs to be done, which is probably around about that there. And so we've got quite an extreme, if we've gone too far, we've got quite an extreme interpolation there. Just copy previous keyframe, paste that in, and that gives you a rough idea, or a better starting point for your efforts for the next go. But the easy way of avoiding that is not go quite as far with the next keyframe that you need to get this crazy wild interpolation. So I'm going to just delete this point here, and let's see what's going on here. And actually I'll delete this point as well, and we'll take it just to that frame 106 that we were at before. So we'll just get a bit of closure going on here. And there we go. So we've got our edge coming in. Let's check that edge out. Needs a bit of work. The top of the leg there. But from a consistency point of view, we are actually getting there. Cool. I'm going to leave the rest of the leg there for the moment, because I want to take a quick look at the head. Because the head is always actually quite an interesting little area that needs constant care and attention. Simply because actually there's a lot of stuff going on with it. It's one of the things that's very likely to move around because people are moving their heads, tilting it, looking one way or the other. And as they do that, little bits and pieces start to point out. So we take a look at the back of the head here. Zoom in just a tiny bit. Even with, without the hair, and the problem with the hair that we've seen before, we've got quite a few different shapes we need to do. We've got, one for the main sort of cranium here, and we're quite lucky in that he doesn't sort of move his head far too much. It's more sort of a tilt back. But we have an ear coming on here. We've got another ear going on the other side, obviously. We've got puckers of clothes coming in that we need to take a look at. And as we come along over to where it starts to flip over, we start to see not just the top of the head, we've got a nose pointing out here. And then we've got the rest of the face coming in there as well, with a chin and lots of other pointy stuff. So all in all, there's no, good way of covering this whole face just with one single shape. Because we end up just sort of doing, creating too complex a shape that's very difficult to keep consistent. So I'm going to take it from around about frame 97 here, and I'm just going to do one shape for the face. So I'll create my new layer, bring that in there, and I will call this head. While we're taking a quick look at preferences, one other thing I want to have a look at is actually the primitive type here. Currently it's set to Bezier, and that's how it is when you first install Silhouette FX, but we can change this to either B-spline or X-spline, depending on your own preferences. And I'm going to actually keep this to X-spline. I like working with X-spline, so it just means that when we draw our primitives, our circles, turn my overlays on. So when I draw my circles now, we've got an X-spline instead of here, well, I've got a Bezier. I'll change that around. And actually, while we're here, another thing we take a look at on my circle. Eagle-eyed of you will have seen that when we go to the number points here, I can also look at tagged as well. So hit OK. If I don't want to have a look at all of the numbers all the time, I can just right-click on any of our control points and tag individual control points. So if we've got, let's tag that one there. So if we've got, a much more complex shape with a lot of control points, and we only really need to track, 2 or 3 of them, or, keep an idea on where 2 or 3 of them are, tagging them, and if I right-click again, untagging them, is a good way of striking that balance between function and keeping the interface nice and clean. Cool. All right, so let's come back and take one for the face here. Back into the prefs, change that to X-spline. There we go. Cool. So I've got my face. Come into the transform. Maybe add another point just by holding down the Alt key and clicking inside. And this is going to be face, but I don't want to put that in the head just yet. Let's put it in the camera stabilized because I want to keep my camera stabilized up. So now when I'm looking for this, let's go out a little bit. So now when I'm looking for this, I'm looking to maintain that point-to-point matching that I had before. So frame 97, the bottom 2 control points here off the top of the head, basically at the scalp, top of the scalp. So we come down here to frame, it says 86. If I'm going to transform this up, let's move it so that that top edge here is still pointing to the top of the scalp. And reshape the rest of it. here's where I could actually come in and probably go back to my reshape tool, add my corresponding point over on this side here. So that gives me a little bit more flexibility when it comes to this area here. So I need to think, how do I really want to keep this in? Because I can't come in, or I could actually come in and create lots of complex shapes coming around here. But then it starts getting a little bit tricky. So I'm going to think about this a little bit harder and go, okay, well, this area here, well, this bit here is also related to the top of the skull as well. And I know I'm going to need, let's zoom out just a little bit, I know I'm going to need an extra shape to deal with the top of the skull in a little bit. So why don't I just make it simple for myself, not worry too much about this particular area right now, and wait and see how it pans out when I add in the other shapes. We've still got that same issue coming in here as well. So in fact, it's even more pronounced. We've got this side part here where I really can't get a good handle on it without coming in and doing actually quite a lot of reshaping. Cool. So let's come to a point where I really can't see the face anymore. Just round about here. Get the top of the brow still, or the top of the scalp. Got a nose pointing out. Think how I'm going to deal with that nose. I think I'm going to make a new shape for it. I'll do that in a little bit. And so this point now, where the face is actually not going to be seen anymore, it's not going to be useful anymore. So the easiest way to keyframe it on and off is actually just come to my opacity button here, and I can just turn that off there. Click back on it again, and I've got myself a little opacity keyframe on the timeline. Come to the frame before, turn that off properly, and this gives me a hold keyframe on the opacity, rather than if I came in to my shape itself here and keyframe the opacity down, whereas it would default to give me a linear keyframe. So by clicking on this one here, it's an easy way of turning keyframes on and off. And the best part about doing it this way, as opposed to dragging shapes off, is that obviously when you start to calculate motion blur in on that, if you're dragging layers around instead of just turning off the opacity on them, then you're going to start to get weird blurry stuff happening, which is not cool. Cool, so I've got my face here. Let's come in, lock this up, do another shape for the top of the head. There's going to be a good amount of overlap going on here, which is fine, exactly how it should be. Top head. Change the colour on that. And do the same things we did before with the face, except this time in reverse. And say, okay, well, where's the top of the head going? Well, it's going to be there. So try and match it up that way. Split the difference. Not worried too much about what's going on there, just to keep it nice and consistent, relatively consistent. Split the difference again. So you can see as the head now tilts back, aims to be nice and consistent, even though, you know, we obviously aren't 100% accurate in exactly what's going on with this edge here, because this edge here is the, you know, the top of the brow. Obviously we can't see the top of the brow here, so we've, instead of going back down to where the top of the brow is, that would just be silly. So we're looking actually at the edge itself, and then that transforms itself into the top of the brow, and looking good. We'll take one for the side of the face as well, which we're probably going to have to do on this side. Also, let's come in with another one. Left face. Make it another colour so you can easily see it. Come in, transform that up. Okay, we've got some nice overlays going on here, so I'm not worried too much about what's happening in the other areas. Probably start it around there. Yeah. And if we don't need it anymore, come in, turn the opacity off, and then back on again. So that when we look at the overlays, it's difficult to see it because it all blends in, but should be all looking good now. Again, here I don't even really need to worry too much about it, because the rest of the shapes, like when I do the neck, all of that is actually going to cover up most of the other stuff that the right side is covering here. We'll do the same idea for the left side of the face, well, the left cheek. And when it comes to the nose coming in, we'll just have a quick, really quick shape. I'll do the nose because it's right there. Just a really quick shape for the nose. It's only on a few frames, but those few frames are still relatively important, or still very important. Because you would definitely miss who didn't have his nose anymore. There we go. Cool. So there we go. That really is a couple of different ways of checking out when objects go in and out of view. So we've got how we handled the leg here. We repurposed the edge of this shape of the top of the leg here. We completely repurposed it so that the back of the leg morphed into the side of the leg, morphed into the front and side of the leg, back to the side, and then eventually it would go back to the quad that it was working on before, so the top part of the leg that it was working on before. And the same with the buttock here. We really sort of actually do quite a big repurpose of it, making sure that we kept at least one of the edges very consistent at all times, because if we don't have that edge consistency, then it becomes very obvious what's going on. The other way we handled things coming into view was with the face. We broke it up into, well, actually into the head, actually I should say. We broke it up into small parts, as we've done before, and then keyframe the visibility of those small parts as they came in and out of view. Great, well that's it for this class. I hope that's given you some food for thought. So if you've got any more questions about this or the overall approach to doing this human roto, then drop by the forums and just post them there, and I'll be happy to answer them. I'm Ben Brownlee, and I will see you again next time. Thanks for now.